It's time for a new 1080. Everybody's favorite high cushion New Balance running shoe has undergone quite the change for version 14, so let's talk about all the things you should expect with this update. Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets Runners. The 1080 has been one of those go-to super soft neutral running shoes for quite a while now. The v13 was one of the softest to date, and now it's time to move on to the v14. This run test came at a great time for me. I'm racking up the kilometers training for a marathon on December 1st, and this shoe was an awesome tool that I will definitely continue to use going forward. There have been some great updates making this an all-around better performer, and we'll get into all of that in a second. But first, let me remind you that any of the shoes we talk about on this channel you can check out on our website, racketsandrunners.ca, and please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get right into the 1080 v14 specs and design. It has the same stack height and drop as the previous v13. It's 38 millimeters in the heel, 32 millimeters in the toe box, making for a 6 millimeter drop, and that midsole is made from their Fresh Foam X foam. This is New Balance's premium softer foam that they use in most of their high-end non-plated shoes, and on the v13 it was extremely plush. It was one of the softest shoes in its category and for 1080s in general. The big design change here is that the v14's Fresh Foam is firmer. It is still extremely soft, still probably the softest shoe in its class, but there is noticeably more resistance to that cushioning than there was previously. It's also increased in weight a little bit. The 13 came in at 265 grams in a size 9 US. The v14 weighs 280 grams. Now don't worry, it's still fairly light in its category. The Brooks Glycerin and Asics Gel Nimbus come in at 276 and 302 grams respectively. New Balance has also updated the outsole's rubber strips, making them wider and longer than the thinner, shorter ones that were on the 13. Rubber is stiffer than the super soft Fresh Foam, so making those rubber strips bigger, especially in the forefoot, definitely plays a part in adding to the shoe's firmer overall feel. Finishing up with the outsole and midsole, they've made the rocker a bit more aggressive in the forefoot. It's not a big change, but it's definitely there, and that makes sense considering the quicker, more responsive feel they're clearly going for with this shoe. Moving on to the upper, the v13's was very soft with quite a minimalist mesh weave that had very little reinforcement to it. Things have gotten, again, a little sturdier on the 14. It's woven to be denser where it connects into the outsole and going through the middle of the toe box to stop any potential overstretching. In the areas you do want compliance though, it's still nice and soft and has a good amount of stretch to accommodate for a wider variety of foot shapes right out of the box. Now the last change to note is that they did make the toe box a little bit wider than it was previously, which I actually think works really well with this upper that has an otherwise more snug fit. Stepping into the 1080 v14 really provides the same sensation you should always expect when going into one of these premium ultra soft cushioned runners. Comfort is everything. The upper is extremely soft with zero pressure points whatsoever, and the extra width is perfect to accommodate for that slightly more snug weave they have on the sides. In terms of fit, it's classic New Balance, especially now that it's gotten a little wider up here. Wide in the toe box, nice and locked in the midfoot and heel without being narrow. It's a tried and true fit for them, and if it's worked for you before, this shoe should fit like a glove. But of course, if you do have either very wide or very narrow feet, there are plenty of width options as usual. Of course, this is a 1080, so the midsole maintains that comfortable feel. It's so soft, it really feels like you're stepping on a cushion. It's been a while since I put a 1080 on, but it really is an industry-leading shoe if you like that pillowy sensation. It's significantly softer than the 880, softer than the Glycerin and Nimbus, and compared to plated shoes, this is more of a cushioning that soaks up your step-in comfort rather than one that provides a springy, bouncy feel. Now I have to say, it's very soft, but I am happy they firmed it up a little bit. If I hadn't used the v13, I never would have used the word firm in this review, but when I stepped into that shoe, I found its cushioning a little too mushy. Here, that extra little bit of resistance is just enough to make the v14 feel more responsive and aggressive without being too firm in any way. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of super soft cushioning, so take my criticism of the v13 with a bit of a pinch of salt, but I much prefer the way this felt both in store when I put it on and when I took it out for a run. The purpose of a neutral cushioned runner like the 1080 is to provide a very soft ride that softens up your contact with the ground. At first, you may not feel like you need it, but it gets better and better as you increase the kilometers because eventually you fatigue, and that's when a softer impact is great for your joints and your muscles. Like the v13, it softens impact extremely well, but it provides a noticeably more responsive kick through your stride. I don't want to use the word springy because it's not like a plated shoe, but it does feel like it pushes back on you a little more. It's that combination of the stiffer midsole, the wider outsole rubber, and that slightly steeper rocker in the forefoot, And what this does is make the 1080 V14 respond slightly better to changes in pace, which is not an area overly cushioned shoes usually do too well in. I ran a negative split 10K with this 1080, and when I upped the tempo at that 5 km mark, I didn't feel like this shoe was resisting that faster pace too much. With the V13, when I did try to up the tempo, I got a bit lost in that cushioning and felt like the shoe was holding me back a little. Now I do have to say, this is still quite soft compared to its competition. I'm a little bit heavier than I want to be right now, and I could definitely feel myself sinking into that cushioning still. It's definitely a little bit more wobbly than average. That's what you get when you combine softness and stack height without adding a plate, but this is still the area it has improved the most coming from the V13. It is nice that New Balance tested the limits of super soft cushioning on that shoe, but toning it back has made for a clear boost in stability with what I would say are very few downsides. In terms of ride, this is a neutral runner, so there's not much structure built into the midsole, but there is still a little bit of heel aversion, which is not too intense, but it complemented my natural gait cycle very well. Now, like I said earlier, super soft neutral runners are not usually my cup of tea, but I had a great time testing these, and they actually did help me appreciate what these shoes are meant to be so good at. I put about 50 kilometers into them. I'm training for a marathon right now, so I've been going for a lot of long, slow runs at super even paces to build up my endurance, and they were absolutely ideal for that. Once you get into a set pace with these 1080s, you sink into the cushioning, you don't stomp uncomfortably into the ground, and that allows you to get dialed into this super rhythmic stride that you feel like you could maintain forever. In Vancouver, we have an amazing flat 10K run around the Stanley Park seawall where you don't have to worry about stopping or running into too many turns or hills that could take you out of your rhythm. Doing that run in these shoes was almost too easy. I was just brainlessly jogging, checking my heart rate every so often to make sure I was on target, and I sure was. There was very little suffering involved, in part because I was doing endurance efforts, so I wasn't pushing my heart rate too high, but also because of just how easy they were on my body because of how they smooth out ground impact better than pretty much anything else out there. Lower stack, less cushioned runners like the 880 do provide better ground feel, but they're also harsher. And as much as I like carbon plated shoes, that plate is so stiff it can be a little punishing when you fatigue. Everything about the 1080 is forgiving. That's the best way to describe it, and they were a godsend for me because I was suffering from some stiff hamstrings going into this test, and they allowed me to keep running while also alleviating that stiffness and certainly not adding to it. If you are going out for a recovery run or a long run where you're not interested in hitting a PR, they are amazing and they're a great tool in your training because of that, but they're not without their flaws. The stability issues that stem from a high stack, super cushioned runner aren't too important when you're running at the same speed in the same direction for a while, but they do start to matter when you throw some variety into the mix. Let's start with changes of pace. I mentioned this when I talked about my negative split 10K, and I do maintain that they're better than the V13 for faster paces, but they're still not the best. Because they're so soft, it feels like you're almost working against that cushioning when you up the tempo. It's sort of like quicksand, where the more force you apply, the less responsive they feel. Going faster, I felt like my foot and lower leg muscles had to work a little harder to propel me through the end of my gait, so extra pace didn't come super easily. When you compare this to something carbon plated with a fuel cell foam, the two types of cushioning are almost opposites, where that fuel cell and plate combo gets better at faster paces, and this gets relatively worse. Now, like I said, the Stanley Park seawall is super flat, but I also wanted to test this on hillier terrain, which is another area I didn't like this high cushioning as much. On the uphills, I felt like I wanted something with more efficient energy return, and on the downhills, I really didn't like that wobbly combo of high stack and super soft. You stride with a lot of force when you're running downhill, so you're trusting that your shoe is going to stay nice and sturdy under your foot, and especially coming back from an ankle injury, that softness didn't provide the most confidence-inducing feeling. I also tested the 1080 on uneven terrain, not full-on trail running, but some paths that required more turning or the occasional grass patch with some roots, and this is another area I would have preferred something lower with more ground feel. I want to be able to react to that unevenness if it is going to be a potential problem, and this super soft cushioning just wasn't responsive enough for that. Here's the thing. This 1080 isn't trying to be some sort of middle-of-the-road shoe that does it all. It's unapologetically a high-stack, high-cushioned runner that's built for comfort. It's made for high mileage and a nice, easy recovery pace, and for that, it's one of the best shoes on the market right now because one of the best things you can experience when going on a run like that is your brain sort of turning off and going into cruise mode. You don't need willpower to force you through cardiovascular pain, and you definitely don't want to be thinking about your stride being uncomfortable. Everything is smooth here. Some other high-cushioned, high-stack runners may be a little more speed-focused, but they're still not fast, and this is better at what it's supposed to do. And of course, it has made improvements in terms of responsiveness, which does make it more well-rounded than the V13. So if you do need to tackle more terrain variety to get to that endurance part of your run, it's better, which is a bonus. This is also why I didn't care too much about that slight increase in weight. This is never going to be the fastest shoe, so that extra weight really isn't too important. And if that's the small price to pay to make this more well-rounded, then I'm more than happy to do that. Right now, the most important thing I need in my training to make sure I at least complete this marathon is a bunch of time spent running. I need to get those hours in to build up my endurance, and these make that more enjoyable, and they're great on my body, which obviously allows me to recover quicker so I can go for more longer runs. I'm definitely going to be using these a lot more in the next couple of months. I'll switch to more responsive runners when I do up the pace, but these are some of the best in class for what they're supposed to do. With that said, that is going to be the end of this review. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that if you do want to try on the brand new 1080 V14, you can come visit our awesome shoe fitters in store, or if you want to buy it, you can go online at racketsandrunners.ca.